Hello, grade 12 students. In this video, we're going to start our new chapter about the sexual cycle. We will start with part 1, Reproduction and Genetics, chapter 15, Regulation of the Female Sexual Hormones, document 1, about the sexual cycle. First of all, you have to know that the menstrual cycle of the female is divided into two parts. The first one is called the ovarian cycle. The second one is called the uterine cycle. The ovarian cycle is composed of pre-ovulation phase, which is called the pre-ovulation phase is called the follicular phase, and the post-ovulation, which is after ovulation, is called the luteal phase. So you have to know that ovarian cycle, the pre-ovulation phase is called the follicular phase, or development of follicles, and the post-ovulation is called the luteal phase. Okay, so pre it's before the ovulation, post is after the ovulation, whereas the uterine cycle is concerned for the uterus. So we have the period, or we have the menses, which is about 4 to 5 days or 6 days, it depends on the female. So we have here the menses, we have the proliferative phase, and we have the secretory phase after ovulation. So pre-ovulation, we have the menses, menstrual cycle, we have the menses, and we have the proliferative phase, and after ovulation, post-ovulation, it's called the secretory phase. Uterus is known to be the site of implantation of the zygote, the fertilized egg, which was produced in the ovary of the female. Then the ovary and the uterus, they should synchronize their cycles, meaning that the uterine cycle and the ovarian cycle, they should be working together. They should work together in order to accomplish the process, if there is fertilization or not. If there is fertilization, the uterus is said to be the site of implantation of the embryo. So if there is fertilization, so uterus is the site of implantation. And you have to know that premenstrual cycle, this is the endometrium. We're going to talk about this in details about the endometrium, and we're going to talk about the different hormones secreted. So during the menses, the endometrium, we have menstrual flow, we have release of blood during the menstrual cycle, and post menstrual, what will happen, and we will talk about the female hormones, progesterone and estrogen. They are the primary sexual hormones, estrogen and progesterone. About 8 to 10 days before ovulation, uterus knows that there is a message that is received to the uterus that oocyte 2 started to resume meiosis 2, where it was blocked, and will soon enough be ready to be released. So the uterus will anticipate the process of fertilization and that of the formation of the zygote. So the uterus will prepare itself for the major event, for the implantation of the zygote or the embryo. You have to know that. First, you have to know that the tube-like glands, they start to appear in the endometrium lining. The role is to sustain these tube-like glands, to sustain and to nourish the embryo with the nutrients needed. Spiral blood vessels will start to form. Blood vessels, they hold more blood, meaning that we have more nutrition for the embryo. So these tube-like glands that appear in the endometrium lining, which is the innermost lining of the uterus, this is the endometrium. So what is the endometrium? It's the innermost lining of the uterus. So the spiral blood vessels, they increase in number, and these increase in the spiral blood vessels will lead to the flow of more blood, meaning that more nutrition will be found to the embryo or will be delivered to the embryo. So here is the endometrium, here is the endometrium, the lining of the uterus, the inner lining, and here we have the myometrium, but we work almost about the endometrium. This is the inner lining of the uterus. This is the vagina, the female reproductive system, and we have the cervix. Okay, cervix is the start, and we have here the uterus, where we have the endometrium and the myometrium. Innermost one is called the endometrium, and we work about this. Sloughing of the endometrium will cause the appearance of the menstrual cycle. As such, due to the presence of more and more glands and more blood vessels, all of them, the endometrium will grow and become thicker. So becoming thicker, these changes are referred to as the proliferation stage, and they are under the effect of the hormone which is called estrogen, produced by the developing follicles in the ovary. Proliferation stage confounds with the follicular stage of the ovarian cycle, so they confound to each other. Here you have to know that the follicular phase, and we have here the luteal phase, follicular phase and the luteal phase. The follicular, it's pre-ovulation, and the luteal and the ovarian cycle, it's post-ovulation. You have to know that this hormones, we have estrogen and progesterone. The red one is for estrogen and the green one for progesterone. So you have to know that we are under the effect of estrogen, okay, during the proliferation phase. Okay, so we are under the effect of estrogen. Also, after at the luteal phase, we have estrogen level, and here we have a new hormone, which is the progesterone, which increase in the amount after ovulation. Why? We will discover in the coming slides. More blood vessels and more glands will appear with time until we reach the ovulation day, which is about the day 14. Around ovulation, during the post-ovulatory phase of the ovarian cycle, the endometrium will acquire the maximum number of glands and vessels. Its glands start to produce the nutritive liquid glycogen and appear as a uterine lace for the uterus, as a uterine lace. Uterine lace protects the uterus. This part of the uterine cycle is known as the secretory phase, and it's under the effect of the estrogen and progesterone together. So this phase is called the secretory phase, and it's under the effect of both estrogen and progesterone, both hormones, both female sexual hormones. They are produced by what? By the corpus luteum, the yellow body, during the luteal stage of the ovarian cycle. So pay attention here. This figure, we have the follicular phase before ovulation, and we have the luteal phase after ovulation. Here we have the corpus luteum. Corpus luteum secretes estrogen and progesterone. That's why under the effect they are produced, both of them, they are produced by the corpus luteum. So during the menstrual cycle, we have menstruation at the beginning, uterine cycle. We have proliferative phase, and we have the secretory phase. Secretory phase, it's under the both hormones, estrogen and progesterone, secreted by the corpus luteum. Here, during the secretory phase, we have thickening of the endometrium. So here, the thickening of the endometrium. While here, showing the hormone levels for estrogen and progesterone. And here we have FSH and LH. We'll talk about them later. FSH is follicle stimulating hormone, FSH, and LH, it's luteinizing hormone. This is the luteinizing hormone, LH. So these hormones, we're going to talk about them. These are the gonadotropic hormones, LH and FSH. So these hormones, we're going to talk about them in the coming sessions. If fertilization occurs, what will happen? If it occurs, the fetus will be implanted in the uterus, where eventually the endometrium will form what's known by the placenta. Whereas, if there is no fertilization, what will happen? If there is no fertilization, then between days 0 and 6 of the menstrual cycle, the superficial layer of the endometrium, which is rich in connective tissues, will be sloughed off. So the parallel vessels will be exposed. So as a result, we have bleeding. So sloughing of the endometrium will lead to bleeding, and the thickness of the endometrium will decrease with time, and another menstrual cycle will occur. This is known as menstruation or menses stage, which is due to the drop in the levels of estrogen and progesterone while after the degeneration of the corpus luteum. Okay, so here we have the drop in the level of the hormones, which are estrogen and progesterone. When they drop at this level, which is the menstrual cycle. So during this cycle, the menstrual cycle, there is a drop of estrogen and progesterone. They decrease, and this decrease will cause menstruation to occur again and again. So you have to know that ovarian cycle includes follicular phase and the luteal phase, uterine cycle, menstruation, proliferative, all of them, they are pre-ovulatory phases, and the secretory phase after ovulation. So menstrual cycle occurs again if there is no fertilization, since the corpus luteum degenerate. So there is no more corpus luteum, there is no secretion of estrogen and progesterone.
To understand the various ways that medical science can assist reproduction, it is important to understand how the reproductive system functions in both sexes, because the cause of infertility often lies equally with both men and women. The main players in the female reproductive cycle are the pituitary gland, the ovaries, and the uterus. Their activities are closely coordinated. Each month, one or other ovary releases a single egg, an event known as ovulation. It is brought about by a series of complex interactions between the pituitary gland, the ovaries, and the uterus. The pituitary gland is itself under the control of this small area of the brain known as the hypothalamus. A new menstrual cycle begins when the nerve cells of this center secrete a hormone called gonadotrophin-releasing hormone, GnRH, into the network of blood vessels which surrounds the pituitary gland. Stimulated by pulses of gonadotrophin-releasing hormone, cells in the pituitary gland secrete another hormone, follicle-stimulating hormone, or FSH. FSH travels in the bloodstream, reaching the ovaries. There it stimulates the formation and growth of an ovarian follicle in one or other ovary. The follicle consists of an egg, a number of surrounding cells which secrete estrogen hormones, and fluid. FSH helps the egg to mature and prepares it for release. As the follicle matures, the hypothalamus increases secretion of GnRH. This in turn stimulates the pituitary to secrete a second hormone which acts on the ovary. This is luteinizing hormone, or LH. Toward the middle of the cycle, there is a sudden peak in the blood level of LH. This acts as the trigger for ovulation. Within minutes of its release, the egg is guided by suction through the fringed opening of the outer end of the fallopian tube, starting it on a journey which will take 5 or 6 days as it passes down the tube and finally reaches the cavity of the uterus. Meanwhile, after the follicle ruptures, it is converted into this yellowish body known as the corpus luteum. Cells of the corpus luteum secrete the hormone progesterone, which brings about important changes in the lining of the uterus, preparing it for possible pregnancy. In fact, the lining of the uterus, known as the endometrium, undergoes changes in response to hormone levels during the cycle. In the first half of the cycle, known as the follicular phase, the developing follicle secretes increasing amounts of estrogen hormone, which encourages regeneration of the endometrium. After ovulation, there are important changes in the endometrium, aimed at making it suitable to receive a fertilized egg. These changes are brought about by a secretion of progesterone from the corpus luteum. The secretion of progesterone is maintained for several days, but if the egg is not fertilized in that time, the corpus luteum withers, and falling levels of progesterone and estrogen trigger the shedding of the uterine lining as the menstrual flow. The cycle then starts again. But if the egg is fertilized, no menstruation occurs, as the corpus luteum continues to function, secreting progesterone during the first 3 months of the pregnancy. Thereafter, numerous changes occur to support the developing embryo.